By David Dunham, and it's his report of the 29th General Assembly of the International Astronomical Union, which he attended in Honolulu. And Dave, feel free to start whenever you're ready.
I think we'll have to have David call the cell phone number.
Okay, I'll let you set that up.
Okay, well, this is the 29th General Assembly of the International Astronomical Union was held in the first 2 weeks of August. If you go to the next slide. Okay, I pushed the mic a little farther away, hope that's better. So anyway, of course, we've been in Australia. We were there from May 15th until we had to make this emergency trip back home. But on August 2nd to the 14th, we returned to the USA, but only to Honolulu. The IAU General Assemblies take place every 3 years and last for 2 5-day sessions spread over 2 weeks. Previously, I attended General Assemblies that are listed there. They provide a unique opportunity for astronomers worldwide working in all fields of astronomy to come together. And there are over 3,000 in Honolulu. In addition to the core administrative meetings, the General Assembly also includes a substantial and attractive scientific program. This usually comprises 2 series of 3 symposia, each lasting for 3 days. Actually, they lasted for 4 or 5 days this time, and they're scheduled during the first and second weeks, respectively. The 15 to 20 more specialized focus meetings are also held with up to 5 topics running in parallel. So anyway, there were some administrative reshuffling at this conference. They changed the divisions and the commission structure of the IAU. And next slide. These list the 6 symposia that were given this year. And they did have also a special session describing the first results of Gaia, which they told us about before they were publicly released about a week after the conference ended. The symposia, the one that was by far the most interesting to me was number 318, Asteroids, New Observations and New Models. Next slide. Besides the symposia, there were these 22 focus meetings, and the most interesting one was Highlights in the Exploration of Small Worlds, which included results, among other things, results from the Rosetta, Dawn, and New Horizons missions. So it was very interesting to see those breaking mission news. Next slide. So, on behalf of IOTA, I gave 4 presentations, which are all given as posters. The results from asteroidal occultations, double star results from occultations, which is part of the Commission 26 double stars, and then 2 talks on solar eclipses. One a general one and one about the 2017 eclipse. In the following slides, I give at least one slide, the title slide from each of these, plus some of the slides that were in the PowerPoint files. But I sent all of the 4 PowerPoint files from which the posters were created. I sent those to Brad for eventual posting on the website if you want to see everything. So next slide. So, these posters were cobbled together from largely from previous presentations that I've been given. So some of the slides are familiar to you, and so I can go over some of them quickly. But The first talk was the one for the Symposium 318, which was sizes, shapes, and satellites of asteroids from occultations. And I tried to give the major coordinators from each of the regions, major regions, as co-authors, and David Harold and Steve Preston, of course. Just gives the abstract down there. 40 years we've been doing these observations, and so it talks about the coordination and so forth, and just things that Dave Harold mentioned in his last talk. Next slide. So you're having trouble understanding. Can you hear me okay now? Oh, okay. Okay, is that better? Okay, okay. Well, yeah, I'll turn down a bit more. Okay, hope that works better. Okay, so anyway, I mentioned the Malta Station deployment, and gave a nod to Scotty Dagenhart, as the who really made that much more efficient for some of us. Next slide. And mention the Occult Watcher planning tool, so that just to show people where they can get predictions for their own location if they want. Next slide. This showed a few examples of asteroidal occultations. This was a grazing occultation where I had 3 events near the northern limit of Marachny occultation a few years ago. Next slide. It just shows still the record with Scotty's 14 observations on Hertha, which Dave Harold actually showed in his model fits. Next slide. So that's shows, of course, our what's become one of our main star attractions, the resolution of the 2 components of 9E Antiope from LQ Aquarii occultation in 2011, July 19th. One thing that hasn't been mentioned at this conference is that I think it was April 2nd this year, we had another occultation of 9E Antiope where we also got pretty good observations. So we're trying to combine the results of the 2 occultations, the July 19th, 2011 and April 2nd this year, to give a publication. We got about 6 chords on one component and about 8 or 9 on the other components. So we did, although it was quite a bit fainter star than LQ Aquarii, we did all right. And I traveled to Texas, Paul Maley and I, to where we got several of the observations with multiple stations. And Roger Venable, others got data too. Next. And this event's already been mentioned a couple of times, but I wanted to highlight it in the for the people at the IAU. Next slide. And I concluded, I mean, there were other slides in that PowerPoint, but I concluded showing resources where people could get more information. The next slide. Since this was a talk for us, or a presentation for a symposium, the proceedings of the symposia are published by the IAU, and so we recently went through the process to submit the publication. We were limited to only 4 pages, so we couldn't do a whole lot, but I gave links and references to where people could get more information. and just described the overall high-level process and gave references to past work and things. And the next slide shows I did have space enough to give some information, so I wanted to show a recent event, so I chose these two observations by the asteroid Camilla to show how the shape models could be fit to the observations and how we could get different aspects at different times. These two events were both observed in the U.S. In May and August of this year. Thanks to Brad for generating those figures, especially for this. Next slide. I mentioned there also in that last one that we have a few hundred observations that are about that good, and so we have several dozen asteroids where we could fit models. Anyway, the next presentation was on close double stars from occultation recordings. I shouldn't have said video there because I do have some photoelectric data from Andrea Rishishi and his group. Anyway, this was just given as a report to the Commission 26 on double stars, and I just sent some input to them summarizing the information here. So I don't know, they're going to write up one overall report for the whole double star commission, which of course includes a lot of other astronomers doing other things. Next slide. But Brian Mason is the was the leader of that commission, and he specifically asked me for a copy of my presentation, so so I had sent that to him. But in this, I stress there's a long history of double star discoveries from lunar occultations, starting with Antares back in 1819. And then I mentioned how I recorded the grays from Western Australia in 2019 with an expedition with Dave Harold and several other observers. Next slide. And this just shows the reduction profile that Mitsuru Soma produced for this grays compared to the Kaguya profile we had at the time. Next slide. And then, so anyway, just give some summaries about how we've discovered, reported discoveries of lunar occultations, double stars from lunar occultations, and we've worked sort of early on with that and prepared, back in the early 70s, Don Stockbauer helped me a lot to generate the first initial list of double stars from lunar occultations. We went through some of the literature and got reports from the Union Observatory in South Africa in the 1930s and a number of other places. But a lot of these, as Dave Harold mentioned, there are over 70% of these visual observations. There are too many dubious events that are included in our report, and unfortunately these have been picked up by the double star catalogers, and so we're trying still to sort that out a bit. And of course the best way to do that is to get video observations of the stars involved in occultations and see if they make sense or not, or if they, in a number of cases we've confirmed those, but most of the others they show that the star is unlikely to be double. But really the best way to do that is to get observations, of course, from two widely separated locations. So depending upon the position angle, we can get a resolution. Next slide. And so this just talks about the recent efforts, and Dave Harold has gone over some of the more recent things relating to that, but I just wanted to mention that in this overall presentation where most people wouldn't have known about our activities previously. And I note at the bottom here that we've begun this collaboration with the current Kepler-2 ecliptic program, and there were the Kepler-2 program had a booth at the IAU there, where I was able to talk to some of their people, and they were glad to hear about our efforts. Next slide. I just copied this, the reports that we're now publishing regularly in the Journal of Double Star Observations. So this was the first one, and Brian Loader has been leading up that effort from New Zealand for the lunar occultation double stars. Next slide. And this just shows one double star that was recorded during a lunar grazing occultation in Australia, showing the different step events of the different components. Next slide. And then this just shows a couple of other examples of double stars that we have recorded. I think in this case, this was two different observers. Then I also mentioned some of the professional work that's been done. That's coordinated mainly by Andrea Riccici. He worked for a long time at the European Southern Observatory, and actually now he's in Thailand, so he doesn't make his observations there, but he has access to the very large telescope in Chile, and so he's made some fantastic observations there. Most of the observations by the professionals are in the infrared, allowing higher signal to noise and even some daytime observations. I'm just showing samples here. There's no complete lists or anything. That'd be too long. So anyway, should show the next slide, please. This just shows some of the other people around the world who are doing photoelectric observations of occultations at professional observatories. I should point out Octavi Fours recently moved to North Carolina, so he's starting a program down there. Next slide. Now this just shows the lunar occultation observations at the Very Large Telescope in September 2009, where they managed to get 200 events recorded in over 2 half nights. So, as I said, 184 confirmed occultations with 22 binaries and 5 triple stars and 2 angular diameters and several extended or complex sources. Next slide. Then besides lunar occultations, of course, we also record occultations of double stars by asteroids, which also have been talked about more. This just shows one good example by the asteroid Una, where there was the main event and then the secondary event. You could see the dip, and then for a long time both components were gone, and then the secondary reappeared, and then the primary. So that was by Dennis DiCicco. 2011. Next slide. Next talk is, the other presentation I gave was solar diameter measurements from eclipses of the solar variability proxy. And of course, Roger Venable discussed that very well in one of the first talk, I think, today. I would have added him here if I had included his results from this talk. If we get another one, we'll certainly do that. During the past 45 years, members of IOTA have observed 20 annular and total solar eclipses from locations near the path edges. First, the observations were done timed visually, mostly using projection techniques, until we switched over to video in the 1980s. And then I gave an overview of IOTA's long-term solar research, measurements, research, observations near central eclipse passes since 1970. Um, and that means total or solar or annular eclipse path edges. Um, Analysis of historical observations back to 1715. We really want to look for more of those. We know a few of them that haven't been analyzed properly yet. We want to reanalyze all of the observations and analysis that I've been involved with were done with Watts charts data. We need to redo them with LRO and Kaguya profiles. These large tasks might be manageable with help from some others in and outside of IOTA. So I was trying to encourage some interest in this project. Um, Anyway, this just gives the table of results that we generated a few years ago. Doesn't include the very most recent eclipse. There have been a few since then, of course, but showing the summary work, the work that we did up into the around 2008 or so. Next slide. And just some summary of the remaining work that needs to be done, which I sort of mentioned earlier. How Google Earth and other just tools that we have now make position determinations much easier than using topomaps that we had before. And if we get good location descriptions, we can get good positions. Anyway, new observations with previous and modern techniques are needed to calibrate the earlier observations. Anyone near a university or a central eclipse path, or even with just internet access, might be able to help. Next slide. Then I gave just a short presentation on the poster on the 2017 total solar eclipse from near the path edges. There's really haven't had any time to do much about that eclipse, and I won't until I get back to the U.S. Permanently, and sometime next summer maybe we'll start really planning for the 2017 eclipse. So that'll give us a year to hopefully get our act together with what we might do. Um, um, Anyway, we want to try to concentrate on getting observations of different types that have been used in past eclipses. Roger Venable told us of things to do in the future to help improve things, but we can't go back in the past and use those techniques. So we want to be able to compare with whatever bad methods were used in the past. We want to be able to quantify the errors in those methods by comparison with better observations of the same eclipse. And this 2017 eclipse gives us a great opportunity where we can really concentrate a lot of observers and get a lot of observations by different techniques. Next slide. This showed the path of the All-American eclipse. Next slide. Just tells the primary goals. Standardization of video clips and solar filters, co-located observations using previous techniques, and so forth. More use of narrowband filters like Roger talked about, and of course IOTA tried to do some standardization for the May 20th, 2012 eclipse. I know there was a parallel effort where they selected different filters in Europe, and so we don't want to step on their toes either. Anyway, Roger mentioned the problems with the Picard satellite data, and I've heard from other sources that they're not too happy with the results from that either. Anyway, next slide. So they're still trying to get observations with the solar disks and from balloons. I think they can get some better observations now and that's flown a few times already, and they're trying to get more. Anyway, this just talks about some of the past efforts for 2012. Next slide. and it shows an example. I just wanted to show one example of the beads and used Ted Swift's observation of May 2012. Next slide. Just talked about mentioning how you know, the Boy Scouts and Consolidated Edison workers were deployed across the southern limit to observe just visually for the southern limit of the 1925 eclipse that crossed Manhattan. So similar efforts might be made for the 2017 eclipse in towns that are straddling the limits, and could be a great public outreach opportunity for IOTA. So I'm going to try to coordinate with you know, the American Astronomical Society that has a special working group for this eclipse, and they're trying to encourage publicity and different things that can be done for this eclipse. So I hope we can get some support or help and work with that. So next slide. Then besides these talks and all the interesting symposia and everything that we attended and all the news and so forth, there also were two occultations that occurred during the General Assembly in Honolulu that provided another possibility of, the first one occurred only a couple of days, just a couple of days after the meeting began, so there wasn't really a chance to publicize it too much. It was a grazing occultation of a 6.5 magnitude star, 96 Paseo, in the gray zone past southern Honolulu with a path only a mile south of our hotel. So it's the first grazing occultation where I've actually just walked to the gray zone, you know, hauling this telescope in a suitcase, and then setting it up at the site, which I'll show you soon. We brought a 120 millimeter maxi telescope with us, and due to the 73 degrees very high altitude, we had to use a paver mount. And it was the only thing that we could easily get to that altitude and point and control. So thank John Broughton for that course. And I wanted to mention, I didn't mention before when I talked about the paver mounts, that he has plans to make lighter versions. The ones he has are made of wood, so they're a little, you know, for instance, the maxi paver mount that he has weighs about 1 kilogram more than the Ted Blank design, that doesn't do well at the high altitudes, but is lighter and easier for air transport. We hope we can make a paver mount, though, out of aluminum that doesn't have to be, you know, as bulky, quite as bulky as the wooden ones, and quite a bit lighter. We will see about that. That's one of the last things I hope we can do before we leave Australia. And on 2013, there's on the 13th, there was an occultation of a 9.6 magnitude star by the asteroid Rhodesia. I thank Ernie Iverson for the pre-point charts he prepared for that, and for all of the Australian events that I talked about in my previous talks. So of course he gave a good presentation today about that process. Anyway, I see Tony George has a mention about possibly using DSLRs for the 2017 eclipse like you tried for Regulus. Maybe so. Yeah, it would be interesting because then you could have recorded visual type observations on a recording. That's kind of what Roger Venable hinted at, where my son just used a camcorder to record the 2012 eclipse. We were at the northern limit while Roger was at the southern limit for that eclipse. And I used sort of traditional filtered method with a, I think the 5-inch or 4-inch Schmidt-Cassegrain to record beads at the same site where William was, and we got a significant difference. So yes, there's all sorts of different possibilities. We will try to delve into them next year in more detail. So anyway, with these two occultations, go to the next slide. I talk about the August 5th event, the Grays first. Um, this just shows the gray zone, the multiple events zone crossing southern Honolulu. The conference center was just to the upper left outside of, just outside of the green line here, which is the northern limit. But there was a miss up in that area. And so, as I said, our hotel was just off to the left. And you can see in the middle is there's a park right on the coast, and you can see Diamond Head at the bottom. One of the days we played hooky from the meetings and went to Diamond Head, or actually it was the weekend, which we had free anyway, and we actually just walked there and walked across the crater and up it, and so sort of interesting. But the place where we observed was right at the north edge of this park, right on the beach. It was mostly cloudy that night, and there were breaks in the clouds, and we were able to get focused and everything and see the star. We had a clear break during about up to 5 minutes before the event. Then the Grays cloud came over, and we didn't get any observations, and of course it cleared off about 3 or 4 minutes after or so. Honolulu at least has slightly better weather than the other side of the island, but still it's pretty cloudy there. It's not, it's of course right at sea level. You have to get up from the mountains to poke above the coastal clouds, which extend up to about 5,000, 6,000 feet or so much of the time. And so, next slide. This just shows the possible occultation of 9.6 magnitude star by the asteroid Rhodesia, which occurred on the 13th of August. And as you can see in the little inset map to the left, prepared from Derek Wright's site with the Google map, the island Oahu was north of the northern limit, but Honolulu was pretty close to the predicted northern limit, and we were well within the 1 sigma uncertainty zone, so there was a reasonable chance for an occultation there. And you can see from the map, the global map, that the path passed over the Hawaiian Islands, and the sun altitude was 12 degrees below the horizon at the time, so it didn't give us any time to set up multiple stations, and I didn't have any, for an event like this where I really couldn't swim between the islands or anything, so we were stuck on Hawaii and didn't go to the effort of set up multiple stations with night pointing. But anyway, I posted pictures of this, tried to encourage some people to come out. The next slide shows some publicity. Let's see what I know. The IAU has a newspaper that they publish each day, and so on that day I got a notice, and the event happened early in the evening, and so as it mentions here, it was asteroid occultation at Ala Moana Beach Park, and at that park they were going to have a star party sponsored by the local and the university astronomy clubs, for the IAU, and anyone from the IAU, and several people did come out for that. But the event happening right after, and still in a little bit of twilight. It was, most of the people didn't come to the star party until just after, when it really got dark enough to observe. But anyway, there was a hurricane. Hilda was threatening the island, but it passed to the north, but it still spread some clouds to the area. Next slide. Now this just shows the results. We did get on target using the Maxi on the paver mount, but as it got later, closer to the event, more clouds started to come in, and one actually moved over the field of view, but it happened just a few seconds after the predicted time. So we did get a valid miss observation that you can see is the third blue line from the top on the chart. Clay Sherrod in Arkansas got a miss, the purple line. As you saw from the previous charts, this path crossed the U.S. from coast to coast as well as Hawaii. So we did get several other observations. And it passed over the just south of Washington, D.C., and Bart Villard in Fredericksburg, Virginia, was able to record his first positive observation of the CCD drift stand. So he was the only positive we got on this event. It was sort of a low rank event, so but still it was interesting and got some publicity. Next slide. Yeah, that is the last slide. Okay. Okay, thank you. If there are any questions, let me know.